Oui Capital is a seed stage venture capital fund that backs bold and brilliant entrepreneurs across Africa. Today, we have a portfolio of about 22 companies across 8 African countries, North, East, West Africa, just backing brilliant founders across the continent. I used to keep a book of the investments I made and the investments I think or thought I was going to regret. There was only one name in that book. One thing we're sure of is that we will always and continuously be ambassadors of Africa.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Founders Uncovered Africa. I'm here with Olu, who's the founder and managing partner of Oui Capital.
Thank you very much. Excited to be here. Excited about the conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for coming. I know you're busy schedule.
No problem at all. Always like to talk to like minds in the African ecosystem, so it's good to be here.
Perfect. So can you please give us a quick background on Oui Capital?
So Oui Capital, take a step back. From the name, oui means yes in French, right? And so it was built out of how many no's you get on your entrepreneurial journey, right? How many no's you get, which are not from customers, are from other people who need to empower you to either pursue your dreams, serve a market, or just build a company. And so we decided to be the opposite of the no's entrepreneurs are getting and back entrepreneurs who are building for the African continent to be able to just achieve their dreams. And so Oui Capital is a seed stage venture capital fund that backs bold and brilliant entrepreneurs across Africa. Today, we have a portfolio of about 22 companies across 8 African countries, North, East, West Africa, just backing brilliant founders across the continent.
That's amazing. Before we even go forward into this, I want to talk about your background. So you were big in finance and banking. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, I actually did. So my first degree was in business and accounting. So basically straight cut. I'm always a protagonist for learning the fundamentals, right? And so I think a degree in maybe business, finance, it does help sometimes to set you up for any type of career in financial intermediation, right? Whether it's investment banking, whether it's lending, whether it's credit, whether it's venture capital, private equity. And so I did start my career in banking, specifically credit risk. And I think that really helps because in venture capital today, there is a lot of motion, right? There's a lot of motion, and sometimes that motion might lack direction. And so a career in core finance kind of sets you up to keep what matters in focus, right? The business eventually is about deploying money and recouping money, right? And these are the fundamental tenets of finance. And so that kind of sets you up to be fundamentally strong, even when you go into an industry that is full of nuances, innuendos, and fluff.
Yeah.
And so it does help.
Okay. So it's really interesting to me because with your skill set, you can work anywhere, right? So what really inspired you to start an African-focused venture capital, fund and just run with that?
It's funny when you say with your skill sets, you can run anywhere. I'm also good at making great coffee. I can be a barista, but you don't do that. But yeah, I think I do agree with you that a career in venture capital has very broad skill sets, which make you able to fit in many different industries. And even operating as a VC in itself has very many little roles inside of it, right? I tell people, so you're a consultant, you're a financier, you're even a therapist, right? You're even a therapist to founders a lot of times. You get better at it. And so I actually think a lot of the personal characteristics I possess apart from my educational training, equipped me to actually be successful at this. I think it's the perfect bouquet that you need to be successful in venture. So I think I wouldn't be doing anything else.
But why Africa, right? Mm-hmm. So why this part of the continent?
As you know, I did move back partially from the US in 2017 after a short stint at Silicon Valley Bank. Mm-hmm. And at SVB, basically, I was a relationship advisor supporting startups on the East Coast of the US, right? Tech startups. And based in Boston, Boston is heavy on biotech. And so that was a good mix of just experiences and choices that you could pick from to decide what next in your career is. But what it is that a lot of times, just as they do in strategy formulation, there's the inside out and there's the outside in, right? The outside in is usually looking at what the demand is outside there and figuring out what you want to do. And there's the inside out where you look at your own personal competencies and see what your motives before you decide. So I think it was a mix of both, but I would say that at the point where we were sitting, and this was 2016, 2017, the question I will ask myself is, you are going to be great at venture, yes. But the question is, Africa is blowing up. Who is better placed, better positioned, better experienced to do Africa than you, right? Because now, as someone who's African, born in Africa, knows Africa, and now knows venture, I think both came together as a perfect mix to do African venture capital. And I've never looked back since then.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think, obviously, for me, watching you over the years, I think you're extremely intelligent. I love the investments you've made. Can you talk a little bit about that? Various companies, highs and lows.
Thank you very much. At least one person thinks I'm
and you make good coffee.
That's why you're very charged during this interview. So yes, there are highs and lows, and I'll tell you, it's the last, let's say 5-6 years has been interesting for even me, right? Because you sit down as a young adult and just wonder what your future might look like. I think everyone does it, right? Where you sit and just wonder, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this. But where am I going to be in 6 years? Yeah. Where am I going to be in 10 years, right? So apart from the people who are watching you, it's an interesting movie to see unfold for yourself, right? And so I would say that every day I spend in venture reminds me or validates the fact that I thought I was born to do this. Wow. I used to keep a book of the investments I made and the investments I think or thought I was going to regret, right? There was only one name in that book. Initially, it was a company called Gokada, right? Who I did have the opportunity to invest in, I think, around 2017, 2018. And of course, regulation changes things. Let's just put it that way. And so because of how that unfolded, I went back to that book and took it out, right? Because they really dramatically had to change their business model. It's still a successful company, but it's not what we thought it was going to be, right? They had to pivot because, of course, things changed very dramatically. So I would say every single investment that I have made or been a part of, I have had very, very, very strong conviction for it. And looking back, as a fund, we've had some super successful companies financially. And we've had companies who I would say were successful, but in a different way, right? Some of them didn't make it financially, but they were able to, just push the frontier of knowledge for us and for the founders. So yeah, this company has failed, but what have you learned, right? What has the founder learned? What have we learned from making that investment? So I would say it's been a very mixed bucket, right, in terms of making investments. Yes, some are pretty popular now that have actually just made very visible financial success. Maybe companies like Moniepoint now, but I think every investment that I have made or we've made as a fund is special just because of that opportunity to join the entrepreneur and build their future.
Yeah. I think one thing I noticed, especially with how you go about, venting out companies, you're really big on fundamentals, right? And just from the outside,
it's the banker thing that hasn't left.
Just from a investment standpoint, can you just walk us through that journey? How do you go about vetting out companies, or what do you look for in a lot of these startups?
So this is it's a very interesting question, and you can tell that as an investor you get asked these questions all the time because people want to pin down a formula that works, right? If I look like this and my financials look like this and my growth rate looks like this and my profile looks like this, we're going to get venture funding. To some extent, it's true. And it depends on the stage too, right? So what we look for, usually there is a set of things, right? Is the product solid? Do we think the market exists, right? And if those two things are there, is this something customers will pay for? First step. Okay, we've established that customers are going to pay for it. Are they willing to pay a price that's going to make you profitable?
Yeah.
Right? I can come out and give away something for less than what it costs me. Customers will pay the day I actually charge them what I need to charge them for this to be a good business for me. Then you realize they don't need it that much, or they're not willing to pay that much for it, right? And so it's tricky on that end. But usually we look at those three things. And then separately, we've looked at all those things, and then we look at the founder, all the founders. If this thing is possible as a business success, are you the guy or the group that's going to execute this? And this now comes into scenarios, right? And so that's why early stage venture, which I would probably do my whole life, is a science and an art. And that's why great investors, early stage investors, do all these things that they look for, but they're also scenario and situational based decisions that experience trains you to be better at.
Yeah.
But you have to lean into that. And that's why some people are great early stage investors. And some people are okay because you can learn the science part.
Yeah.
But the art, sometimes it comes with more learning, more training, but also leaning into your individuality. So I would say 60% for me is all these things I've mentioned. The remaining 40% is the secret sauce. If we feel great about you, and all those other things are situational.
So what if they have an amazing idea, right? And they have the right team to execute the idea, but the leader, like you're a little, cautious on the leader, right? How do you have that conversation with the leader to say, hey, you might not be the right person to lead this, but how do you deal with founders? Pretty much, like I know that can be really difficult.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most difficult parts of being an investor because there is an image, right, a facade of being powerful, right? When you go into a power dynamic conversation in the court of public opinion with a founder, you seem to be the person that should know better.
Yeah.
Right? When you're just a young entrepreneur yourself, you just have the responsibility of investing,
Yeah.
right? And that's why a lot of times I stay off controversial topics on Twitter, because you don't want to be in the place of the court of public opinion, because people love an underdog, right? And as an investor, you can never be perceived as the underdog, even though you're struggling,
Yeah.
right? And so what happens is you have to be very careful about conversations like that. If you really think that this is a brilliant idea and this person is not the person to lead it, we're in the business of taking risk,
Yeah.
right? You can try. But understanding that this person might not be the person to take it there is something to keep in mind. Sometimes investors go with guardrails, right? Guardrails in either documentation or guardrails in how they structure the investment to reflect that, that sentiment. But some other times, you just might walk away from an amazing idea just because you think it's not going to end well in terms of investor-founder relationship. And so sometimes you might need to walk away from a brilliant idea, or sometimes you're in the business of taking risk.
Yeah.
Take the risk and tell them in the face, these are my concerns. I hope you can fix it. I wish you the best.
Yeah. So I think we should talk about your first fund, right? Fund one.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, raised $5 million.
Close
To $5 million.
Correct.
Yeah. And you're in the process of starting fund two or starting
We have started deploying fund two.
Wow.
We've actually made a few investments from fund two already. So the next one is probably going to be fund three.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So for fund one, right? Let's talk about fund one. Just talk about that process, you actually having that money and then sorting companies out and investing in those. And what did you take from it, pretty much? What did you look at as a success factor in the companies that you've invested in?
I like how you skipped to the part of you actually having that money. Because that's the part that gives you sleepless nights, right?
Trust me, I know.
You see yourself as an entrepreneur differently. You see yourself in the most vulnerable state. And there are times in a young fund manager's life where they do know how to invest. They have ideas on what they're going to do. But it's a chicken and egg problem. You cannot be successful in investing without money, right? And also, you can't be successful without money, right? And you might not get the money if you're not successful.
Yeah.
Right? So it's that big conundrum, and there's a chasm you have to cross. So I need to put it out there that raising your first fund is not a walk in the park, especially if you don't fit a lot of stereotypes, right? If you do not probably go to Ivy League school, if you're not white, a bunch of things. But we've made a lot of progress over the years, right? And people have really opened up to just pursuing and investing in people who are talented, like you did.
Yeah.
Right? And so a lot of times it's not enough to just know what you're going to do and be a success in waiting. A lot of dreams die at that point where they are not able to basically, I would say your first fund is like a pre-seed or angel round, what it is to a traditional tech founder.
Yes.
And so that's difficult, but don't give up. Then to the other side of the question, and I think a difficult fundraising for a fund manager, I think it builds character, right? It allows you to approach investing very differently, right? It does. It's just like there are a lot of apps now in the US and even in Africa that teach kids how to manage money.
Yeah.
And there's some where kids have to earn money by completing a chore.
Yeah.
Right? When your child starts earning their money by completing a chore, the way they walk through the aisles at stores or shopping centers is different.
That's true.
They guard it to the waist and they say, do I need this? Oh, this one is cheaper. No, in fact, I'll hold it. I'm not going to eat any of that now. I want to save it for that.
Yeah.
Because they know they had to cut the grass or wash dishes for that money.
Yeah.
Same thing it is when you had to cut grass or wash dishes or have a difficult fundraising as a young fund manager. You walk through the aisle of all the companies who want this money that you have spent tens of hours or hundreds of hours traveling around the world for.
Yeah.
And done crazy hours of work for. You approach investing very differently. You approach it from a very humble and grounded perspective.
Yes.
And you almost see it like your money because you had to do chores for it.
Yeah.
It wasn't dropped on your lap.
Exactly.
It wasn't given to you on a platter.
Yeah.
And so how you approach investing, you put your heart into it like it's your money, right? And I think there should be a positive correlation between how difficult it was to raise your first fund and how much energy you put into making sure you're making the best investments.
Yeah.
So personally, I think that difficulty built character and it allowed me and my team to look at investing in a very pragmatic and practical way to say, if this company was our lifeline to get a fund 2, to get a fund 3, are we going to put our money here?
Yeah.
And so when you hold that standard for every investment you make, you're more likely to be successful at picking companies.
No, I appreciate that. I think what really amazes me, right, is the passion that you also have for the continent. You've seen this. You've seen, obviously, this is the youngest, continent out there. Average age, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's about 20, 21
Correct.
years old. To see that and foresee the future and believe on this continent, what do you tell other venture capitalists to look into when they're looking at Africa?
I think it's clear, right? It's clear that Africa owns or has a very unique promise. How that is going to go is a question of how we govern ourselves, right? So that age, population, demographic direction is either an opportunity waiting to explode or a keg of gunpowder.
Yeah.
Right? When you're an investor, what you lean into is reward from risk. And so if you have an appetite for investing in big opportunities, it just makes sense that Africa is a frontier for you.
Yeah.
It just makes sense, right? And that's why it's so exciting, right? And that's why you've seen over the years, the interest in Africa from even non-Africans is different.
Yeah.
It's grown. It just makes sense, right? And I think everything is aligned for an opportunity for Africa to become a place where a lot of wealth is going to be created over the next decade. And so understanding that terrain, being familiar enough to manage that risk is important. And as I said before, who better to manage that risk than people who know Africa well?
Yes.
And that's why I have a huge passion for Africa.
That's great. That's great. So just from your take, right, we know obviously it's a young continent and it will explode. What are your thoughts on the top sectors to look out for?
Interesting. I think it's been clear, right? And I think sectors evolve around the phase of development of a continent or of a people, basically, right? So if you look at the West, the reason why big data and AI is so important at this point is because there's gotten to a stage of almost where marginal productivity is dropping to zero. So you go through in industrial revolution, you go through the computer age, and then you have presidents who come back and say, let's go back to coal, right? Because at that point, the world is looking for the next thing that can catalyze and make production more efficient, right? And that's why AI holds such a powerful and attractive proposition, right? Because it's the next step to leverage our resources. Is that where we are in Africa? No. Can there be great use cases? Yes. And we've been known to leapfrog. But again, you can't innovate your way out of development.
Yeah.
And so what you find and what we do in Africa today is VC 1.0, right? The pathway a lot of countries are already passed through, but we can do it with hindsight, seeing the mistakes they've made. And so that's why you see that core developmental areas are at the forefront. Digital commerce, right? Why are you reinventing the wheel when payments hasn't been sorted?
Yeah.
Right? When renewable or cheaper forms or efficient forms of just keeping the light on haven't been sorted.
Yeah.
Right? And that's why you see that the sectors, right? Like digital commerce.
Digital commerce. Yeah.
Financial technology.
Yeah.
Fintech. Especially payments. And then you see a brother of payments like cross-border remittances. We need to solve these problems. And that's why you see that the biggest companies on the African continent today, tech companies, are in digital commerce, fintech, right? A lot of money is going into sustainability and climate change today, but it's driven by foreign policy.
Exactly.
Right? It's driven by people who are not Africans.
Yeah.
And I get it because we're a connected world, right? And they need Africa to be in some certain places for theirs to work. So welcome and good luck to them. But we're solving VC 1.0. And as I said, digitalizing things and making sure that we can complete trades are most important for us today.
Yeah, you mentioned fintech. You know, I have this bias against it. There's so much investments, you know, funding that are going into fintech companies. But I just don't, isn't that risky? I think a lot of it might be ballooned up in terms of their values.
Yeah, but it's not specific to Africa.
Okay.
Last year, an average fintech stock, public or private, in the US was trading at an average of about 55% of their value.
Yeah.
And so we want to also be cognizant of the fact that this is global and we don't want to make a global problem an African problem, right? It does happen. This is the nature of innovation. In industries like venture capital that finance innovation, only about 20% of the VCs create the value, create 80% of all the value in venture. And so it already tells you that 80% of the money and the investors are going to the wrong place.
Yeah.
It's the nature of the business.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you see investors that either don't know Africa well enough, right, or just are jumping on the Africa bandwagon, right, investing and probably, overheating the ecosystem or the financial system where a lot of companies are valued way higher than what it's supposed to be. It's just the nature of the business.
Yeah.
When an industry or a sector becomes attractive, right?
Yeah,
Go
true.
out in the world. There was a time that if you put blockchain or crypto on your deck, it's 30% more valuation.
Yeah.
Same thing is happening for AI today. No one says it's an Africa problem.
Yeah,
it's just a problem for 80% of the monies that are not really grounded. It's going to go there, and it's just normal.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think it's an Africa problem, but when there's an opportunity in a place, you tend to have the bandwagon effect, and it goes there and overheats things. So I think this too shall pass.
Yeah. Wow. So what's your future plans for We Capital? What do you look for in terms of the future and where you plan on going?
So, very good question. And it's always top of my mind after we complete like a fund or a milestone. So last week we actually did celebrate 5 years of Oui Capital, right?
Amazing.
Yeah, it's like yesterday, and
I remember too.
yeah, it's like yesterday. So we celebrated 5 years of Oui Capital, and people tell times like that make you sit and think, what's the future? Even though you already thought about it, like, what's the future? And we sit with our team all the time and think, one thing we're sure of is that we will always and continuously be ambassadors of Africa. When I say ambassadors of Africa, we will continuously prove that there are gains in investing in Africa, not just impact.
Yeah.
Or financial gains, right? Hopefully, when we eventually are public with like the performance of our first fund, it will be clear, right, that you can do venture right in Africa, return money, and Africa is a good business case, right? But going beyond that, I think the talent in Africa is at par with the talent anywhere else in the world. And so I think the next step is actually to export the learnings we've made in Africa to some other emerging markets that have similar fundamentals with Africa.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see one of our future funds basically just exporting some of the knowledge that we have to other emerging markets. Either is the Middle East. We already invest in North Africa.
Wow.
Either it's the Middle East, either it's Latin America. I wouldn't be surprised to see us basically export African excellence and spread some of the lessons we've learned from the development of Africa to those places. So you might see some more emerging market funds from us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just want to say thank you. And before you leave, I have to also say this. I've been watching you for the past 5 years. I appreciate what you're doing for the continent. I love the companies you've invested in. Obviously I'm a member of your fund.
You have to. You don't have a choice.
No, I love it. I think I'm really excited about what the future holds. For We Capital. I think it's you are the rim. This is going to be a company that will grow big. So
thank you so much. I have an amazing team too. I'll tell you that for sure. It's like we really handpicked ourselves.
Yeah. And
I think working together, it makes everything really special. The last 5 years have gone by like, so I think the next 5 years are going to go by like that too. But hopefully we have a lot more to show for the time. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.